Let's pray. God, I thank you for every single person gathered. I thank you for every person online that will watch this live or watch this in the days and the weeks to come. I thank you that your word has power to set us free. It's that simple and it's that amazing, and I thank you for that. Now, getting naked, whether that's like in the shower or in your room at home, it's just a normal part of life. Now, I know that there are some people that are much more comfortable in being naked than others. And I promise not to look at anyone particularly this morning as we had a conversation that in their home, I'm not looking your direction. But there are some people, Steve, aren't there, that actually are much more comfortable in being naked in their own environment and don't close the bathroom door as often as they should, right? What are you doing down there, Coral? I've got the microphone. I'm having fun. The last line of Genesis chapter 2 says this: "The man and his wife were naked and they felt no shame." Some translations say were not embarrassed. Now, this is not a random little line that Moses includes in the Genesis story. This is there because he's setting something up. He's wanting to show us something that comes next. Now, the Hebrew word that's translated ashamed could also be translated disappointed. It could read, "were not disappointed." But in the context, the most accurate way this one word, this Hebrew word can be translated is actually, can you put it up on the screen? Thanks. I want to show you this. It's actually the word imperfect. And it's only used once in the whole of the Hebrew text of the Bible, this word where this literally means imperfect. And so it should read, "The man and his wife were both naked and were not conscious of any imperfections in their own bodies or in the other person's." Imagine standing in front of the mirror and you're 40 or you're 50 or you're 70 and you see no imperfections. Even some of the most glamorous models in the world will tell you about the imperfections in something in how they look. But imagine not even being able to comprehend that you could have something imperfect with your body, but be completely and utterly not naive, not arrogant, not proud, but just have a sense that everything is right. This is how God made me. Now, that got lost back in the garden, but Jesus came to earth to restore everything that was lost. Now, I want you to watch what happens next, because that is the lead up into chapter 3. And in chapter 3, both Adam and Eve, they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it's the only boundary that God actually put into their world, and they cross it. Why did they do that? I used to think it's because they were rebelling against God. But I don't see that anymore. When you look at the story in chapter 3, I don't see rebellion. I think it's a story that's our story. Because we do the same thing for the same reasons. And every time we reenact that story in our life, we experience the exact same emotions that they experienced. And in verse 7 of chapter 3, it says this: "Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realised they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made a covering for themselves." And then God turns up in the garden, and they're hiding in the trees. And God calls out to Adam. He says, "Where are you? Where are you?" Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to play hide and seek with God. It's a little unfair. And so Adam gives up and he comes crawling out of his little hiding place and he says to God, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. For a long time, I've made the mistake of believing what Adam just said to God was true. And because I believed what Adam said, I've missed what was happening in this moment. And what Adam said to God was not true. He wasn't naked. He had fig leaves. They had sewed them together. They dealt with the nakedness. Now, I'm looking around this morning and I can't see a single naked person in here. I know on the news last night they had 2,000 people in Sydney went starkers into the get all photographed and stuff, but this morning all of you got clothes on. Clothes are the modern equivalent to fig leaves. And so you may have been naked at some time today, but you're not now. And Adam wasn't naked. He was clothed with his little fig leaves. I was thinking about them on the way in this morning. I'm looking at trees I'm going past. I'm glad this happened in Eden because gum trees have got very small leaves. It take a lot of sewing and cutting and making stitching. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, but it is true that Adam was afraid, like really afraid. The Hebrew word means terrified. It's real fear that he felt. But it wasn't because he was naked. Remember how Moses sets this whole story up. And prior to eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve were both naked and they had no consciousness of imperfections. There's no comparison with looking at yourself and then thinking, I wish I didn't have that. I wish I had something else. There's no disappointment with how their body is. There's no embarrassment. There's no shame. And Adam now feels fear, but he's not feeling shame. He's not feeling embarrassment. He's talking about anxiety just overwhelming him. But didn't Adam just get exactly what he wanted? See, Adam wanted control. He wanted to be in control because he'd started to doubt the goodness of God. We're strange creatures as human beings. We can sort of trust God with one area of our life and then we struggle trusting him in another area. Someone might be able to trust God with your finances. God will always provide, but not trust God when it comes to our relationships. Abraham, he was able to trust God to take him from his homeland, to leave his family of origin, to go off, and God would provide a place for him, a homeland. He could trust God. But when God promised him a son, and in the time frame Abraham was waiting, expecting, didn't happen, Abraham took control and he made an Ishmael when God had an Isaac for him. And Adam and Eve, they start to doubt the goodness, the faithfulness of God. And when that happens, we lose our peace. We start to become like a little anxious and worried about things, and we we start to think that we don't have enough. Hang on. We start to worry with what if our kids mess up? What if we don't get healed? What if I don't find the right husband or wife? I'm starting to get older now, and like we start to become a little anxious. When Mandy was, and I've asked if I could share this, when Mandy was 17, I can't quite remember the details, but she was grounded for something. And there was this Battle of the Bands down Lakes Entrance on this Friday night. And she wanted to go to the Battle of the Bands. She's already grounded. And we said no. So after school, she got on the bus that went to Lakes and stayed with friends and went to the Battle of the Bands. And so Coral and I were feeling very concerned about the choices she's making and what she's doing. So I drove to Lakes to find her and bring her back home that night. I did find her, but I didn't bring her back home. And I can remember driving home alone and walking into the house without our daughter and going to sleep that night knowing that the choices she's making are not good and we aren't in control of our daughter's life. At the centre of village life is Jesus. See, he's the glue. And without him, everything else falls over. And anxiety and fear it can grip our heart. And with him, there is realistic hope. There's healing and freedom from that fear and anxiety. There's healing emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. In fact, Jesus is the one who said, with God, all things are possible. All things are possible. In fact, in John 16, Jesus said these words, I've told you all these things so that in me you may have peace. In me is the critical words in that little verse. That in me you may have peace. God is actually found in reality. But Jesus didn't finish that conversation, have peace. He didn't say, hey, peace, man, peace, peace. He didn't say just peace. God is found in reality. And Jesus paints a picture of reality and he says this, here on earth you'll have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, be encouraged, because I have overcome the world. With God, all things are possible. But Paul got to a place in his life where what he wanted to be possible wasn't, and he kept asking God, and he felt Jesus say to him, my grace is sufficient for you. Adam and Eve, they had not had one trial, not one tribulation, not one sorrow. Like Adam had never ever lost his car keys. Eve had never had a dress that she could no longer fit into. Like they had never had a fight over how Adam's mum used to cook the pork roast and get the crackling just right. They'd never had a fight over that, ever. and in this perfect world, they start to doubt the character of God. All over a boundary, a limitation that God had put in their life. They'd start to think, what is God holding off? What's God holding back from us? What's he keeping from us? I've discovered something with grandkids, and it works, Jesse and Zeke, it works with Remy and Brooklyn as well. It's not just you guys, right? But in our house, there can be peace. And the grandkids could have unlimited freedoms to do all sorts of things. But if they ask to do something and their mum and dad or Coral and I have to say no, all the peace goes out the window because they want to be in control. And the harder they fight to be in control, the worse they feel emotionally. There's a meltdown because they are scrambling to be in control and they believe that if they can just get what they want, they'll be happy. And they start to doubt the goodness of their mum and their dad or Coral and I. And they start to say ridiculous things like, you don't care. And they just feel miserable. And they start to become unhappy with life. Now, Adam wanted to be in control. And now every emotion that he's feeling is terrible. He hates these emotions. He's feeling anxious, he's feeling fearful, and he's blaming being naked. Now, there's a very strong correlation between fear and control. When you start to feel a little anxious and a little bit worried about things, you want to grab control. But the more you grab into control, fear rises. As fear rises, the desire to control goes up. The most fearful person in the room, whether it's a family, whether it's a team, in any environment, the most fearful person in the room has the greatest power over the decision making in that family, in that room. Because the people that want peace will give in for the sake of peace, because that person is scrambling the most for control. Our little granddaughter Remy is only about 3, and occasionally she likes to play hide and seek. But the way we do it is she hides in the same room, in the lounge room where we are. And I have to close my eyes and count, and I can hear her where she goes. And when I open my eyes, I can usually see where she's hiding. And for her sake, I call out, "Where are you, Remy? Where are you?" And when God called out to Adam, "Where are you?" it wasn't for God's sake. It was for Adam's sake. It was for Adam's benefit, because what he's giving Adam is an opportunity to press pause, to start to take a step back and go, whoa, how did I get here with fig leaves and hiding from God? Like, how did I get to this place in my life? What is going on? What's behind this? How did I get here? I don't know if you've done this, you probably haven't. But I've heard stories of people that have a little cough or a cold or a sniffle, and you go onto Dr. Google to find out what's wrong. And the more you investigate your symptoms, the more convinced you are by the end of your search on Dr. Google that you either have myxomatosis, calicivirus, distemper, parvovirus. Even though only cats and dogs can get those, you think you've got it, right? And Adam and Eve went to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to gain control. Now, when COVID first hit, our world became anxious, fearful. And what did we do? We went to knowledge. We searched the internet. We found out everything we could about this thing. And the information varied. And people were divided over the information and what they believed to be true. And the more I saw some people diving in to find out information to bring some control into their world, it just created more fear. And in the end, it never changed the outcome. When we go to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, anxiety and fear will always come. It's how it works. There are things that we are not meant to know. We just aren't. In our church in Sydney, there was an old guy, and he was Irish, and he was in his 70s, and he came to me one day and he said, "Lex," he said, "I've done a terrible thing." He said, "I heard about these executions in the Middle East." And he said, "I've been on the internet and I watched one live." And he said, "I can't now unsee it. I can't get this image out of my head." There are things like pornography, we are just not meant to go down that path. The knowledge that we gain doesn't help our peace. It robs us. Even yesterday, I was talking to a mum, and she was telling me that her young son, there was something he loved to do, and he had such confidence, and he loved to do it. But then someone told him about something that could go wrong in that environment. Even though it doesn't happen in Australia, it happens overseas, this problem in this environment. And now that son will not go back and do what he used to do. Because now he has a knowledge that he doesn't have the capacity to understand that only happens in the tropics. It doesn't happen in our coastal waters here. And see, we aren't God. We're not designed to know everything that God knows. So God calls out, "Where are you?" And he's inviting Adam and Eve to be honest with themselves and where the life is, to put their faith and their trust back into him, into his goodness. And instead, Adam goes to fix-it mode. Now, we do this too, don't we? We try to manage a situation and we try to fix it. So what we end up doing is, well, actually, God, it's the woman. The woman. I don't mean to put you under the bus, God, as well, but it's the woman that you gave me, God. You're also responsible for this. It's not my fault. Like, she basically forced me to. She shoved the apple in my mouth. Like, it's not. It's the woman you gave me. And God turns to the woman, and she said, "Well, not me. There's a snake. You made, It's like, and the game of blame just gets passed on down the line. That's what happens when we try to fix our messes. Anxiety and worry increase as we seek to be in control. And God's solution is just so simple. To trust him. To trust in his goodness. To trust Jesus. To put our faith in a God that truly, truly loves us. At home, I breed these little birds. They're about the size of a budgie. They come out of Central Australia. They're called scarlets. And I've got probably about 400 of them. And we built this bird aviary that's about 60 metres long, and it's all enclosed. And I know if one bird is a little bit off, not quite right, I've built an environment for them. I'm breeding them. I've got a hand in creating them. And so I'm invested in them, and I know when everything is not quite right with one bird. Just walking through, I'll see it. I'm a flawed human being with very poor capacity to care for much. God put this world together for us, and don't think just because there's a lot of us on planet Earth that he doesn't notice you, that he doesn't care about your individual needs. He does. Where are you? It can be so hard to be honest with ourselves sometimes, can't it? And God is found in reality. And our desire to control can be so subtle. It can seem noble because we try to do a little deal with God. But it's really because we're trying to be in control. Over the years, I've had people say to me, I actually don't need God. I just try to be a good person. See, that's be good, get good. It's trying to be in control. And our world doesn't work that way. When Jesus was with the disciples and they saw a blind man, the boys said to Jesus, is that because he messed up or his parents sinned? And Jesus says, it's not A or B. You cannot control disease in this world. You can't give it a cause and effect. You can't control. In fact, there's so little in our world that we can control. In your life, what you can control is so tiny compared to all the things that are going on. And you cannot separate fear and anxiety and control. They go together. And if you feel anxious, if you feel fearful, it's because you're trying to control something in your world you can't control. And only trusting in the goodness of God is the only way out. When you're going through something and you can trust God, that's gold. Because even if what you're going through doesn't change, you can hear like Paul heard, my grace is sufficient for you. As I finish, I just want to highlight one little tiny part of the story that all these years later seems almost irrelevant. You can read it and just go straight past it. And it's this. In all the consequences of Adam and Eve taking control of their lives and what that brought, death and disease into our world, all the stuff that happened, as they're being put out of the garden, Moses tells us a tiny little fragment of the story, and he says this: the Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. He's still providing for them. I don't know if you can understand, but up to that point in creation, nothing had died. No one had taken the skin of an animal and made it into clothes. Adam and Eve had no knowledge of how to do that. They didn't know how to tan a skin. Guns had not been invented. Knives did not exist. I don't know if you've tried to skin an animal without a knife, right? They had no preparation for the world that they were going into, but God provided a covering for them. All these years later, Jesus died to provide a covering for us when we reenact the same thing. See, God's care, his faithfulness doesn't change when we're trying to be in control. His faithfulness and goodness to us is still there. And I want to get the band up. And this song, I especially asked them to lead. I want us to have a time of response this morning. Wherever you are in your life, in the honesty of your heart, if you know that there are things that you get anxious about and concerned about and worried about, it's always because we're not trusting God. And I don't say that as a criticism, it's a reality. God is found in reality. And this morning, as we sing this song, I want to pray for people, or I want you just to come and stand and say to God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you. Because he's in the room and he's saying, where are you? Where are you? Come out of your hiding and in honesty, just say, God, I want to trust you more. So thanks, guys. Just lead us in the song.